Listen carefully, because every once in a while, a story comes along that completely shatters the myth that you need money, connections, or a perfect plan to build something extraordinary. Most people believe success starts with resources. But the truth is, success starts with resourcefulness. And the story of Sara Blakely proves exactly that. Imagine being a young woman in your late 20s. No fashion degree, no investors, no connections in the fashion industry. Just an idea. An idea so simple that most people would laugh at it. But that idea would eventually turn into a company worth over $3 billion. That company? Spanx. But here's what makes the story powerful. She didn't start in a glamorous office. She didn't have a team. She didn't even have experience. She started with $5,000 in savings and a problem she personally wanted to solve. And sometimes that's how the biggest revolutions begin. Not with strategy, but with frustration. Let me ask you something. How many billion-dollar companies started with a simple everyday problem? The answer is many. And that's exactly what happened here. One evening, Sara was getting ready for a party. She wanted to wear white pants, but there was a problem. Pantyhose made her look smoother, but the feet were ugly in open-toe shoes. So she did something strange. She took scissors, and she cut the feet off her pantyhose. Now suddenly the outfit looked better, but the pantyhose kept rolling up. They didn't stay in place. And right there in that moment, she had a realization. What if someone created undergarments that smoothed the body, but were invisible, comfortable, simple, and worked with modern clothing? That tiny frustration sparked a huge question. Why doesn't this product already exist? And when nobody had the answer, she decided something most people never do. She said, maybe I'm the one who should create it. And that decision changed everything. Now here's where the real story begins. Because having an idea is easy, but executing it is where most people quit. Remember, Sara Blakely had no background in fashion. She had never built a product, never manufactured clothing, never run a company. At the time, she was working as a fax machine salesperson, driving door to door trying to sell machines, hearing no again and again. But something interesting happened during those years. Rejection made her stronger. It built resilience. It trained her mind. So when she started pursuing the idea for Spanx, she didn't quit easily. She called manufacturer after manufacturer. Most of them hung up. Some laughed. Others said the same thing. This product will never sell. But if you study successful people, you notice a pattern. They don't listen to the crowd. They listen to their conviction. And Sara kept going. Phone call after phone call. Rejection after rejection. Until finally, one manufacturer said something different. He said, "My daughters think this is a great idea." And that small moment opened the first door. Now here's something most people don't understand about success. Ideas are cheap. Execution is everything. Once Sara Blakely finally convinced a manufacturer to listen to her idea, the next challenge began, creating the actual product. But remember, she wasn't a fashion designer. She didn't have a technical background. She didn't know anything about fabrics or clothing construction. So what did she do? She did what every great entrepreneur does. She started learning obsessively. She researched fabrics. She studied undergarments. She visited stores and analyzed products. And slowly she began designing the first version of what would become Spanx. But here's the powerful part. She didn't wait for perfection. She focused on progress, sample after sample, prototype after prototype, testing, adjusting, improving, because progress builds momentum, and momentum builds belief. Imagine launching a company, completely alone, no employees, no marketing team, no legal department, no investors. That was the reality for Sara Blakely. She was the founder, the designer, the marketer, the salesperson, and even the packager. She personally wrote the patent for her product because hiring a lawyer would cost too much. She researched trademarks herself. She designed the packaging. And she even modeled the product for photos. Why? Because she believed something powerful. When you don't have resources, you become resourceful. And resourcefulness is one of the most valuable traits an entrepreneur can have. Let me tell you something. Every breakthrough requires a moment where you push past the point where most people quit. For Sara Blakely, that moment came when she tried to get her product into stores. She approached buyers from major department stores. Most of them rejected her. Some didn't understand the product. Others thought the idea was strange. But she didn't give up. Instead, she did something bold. She flew to Dallas and personally visited a buyer at the department store chain, Neiman Marcus. The buyer was skeptical, so Sara asked her to do something unusual. She said, "Come to the restroom with me." Right there in the store bathroom, she demonstrated the product, showing how it smoothed the body under clothing. And suddenly, the buyer understood. That moment changed everything. Here's something fascinating about the early days of Spanx. The company didn't have traditional advertising. No billboards, no television campaigns, no celebrity endorsements. Instead, Sara focused on something much more powerful: authenticity. She understood her customer because she was the customer. She knew what women wanted: confidence, comfort, and clothing that made them feel good. So the brand voice was honest, playful, and relatable, and customers loved it because authenticity builds trust, and trust builds brands. Now every entrepreneurial story has a turning point, a moment when everything changes. For Spanx, that moment came in the year 2000. The most influential television host in America at the time was Oprah Winfrey. Her show reached millions of viewers, and every year she released something called Oprah's Favorite Things. Products featured on that list often sold out instantly. One day, Oprah discovered Spanx. She tried the product, and she loved it. So she featured it on her show, and overnight, everything changed. When Oprah Winfrey featured Spanx on her show, the phone started ringing. Orders exploded. Stores sold out. Demand skyrocketed. Suddenly, the small startup created by Sara Blakely became one of the most talked about brands in fashion. But here's the truth most people miss. It looked like overnight success, but it wasn't. It was the result of years of persistence, rejection, creativity, and belief. And that's the real lesson. Success doesn't come from luck. It comes from staying committed long enough for the right moment to arrive. After the product appeared on the famous favorite things list of Oprah Winfrey, something extraordinary happened. Demand exploded. Phones were ringing nonstop. Emails flooded in. Stores across the country were suddenly asking for more inventory. Women everywhere were talking about this revolutionary product that made them feel confident and comfortable at the same time. What started as a small idea in a tiny apartment had now become a national sensation. But here's the thing most people don't realize. Rapid success creates a new set of problems. Production needed to increase. Supply chains needed to grow. Retailers wanted larger orders. And all of this was happening to a company that had started with almost nothing. But instead of being overwhelmed, Sara Blakely focused on one thing: serving the customer better than anyone else. Because when customers feel understood, they don't just buy your product. They become your biggest promoters. Many entrepreneurs create products, but the most successful ones build brands. And that's exactly what happened with Spanx. The brand wasn't just about shapewear. It was about confidence. It was about helping women feel comfortable in their own skin. The messaging was playful. The packaging was bold. The tone was empowering. Everything about the brand felt different from traditional undergarment companies. And this difference made customers remember it. Because people rarely remember products, but they always remember how a brand makes them feel. And the feeling behind Spanx was simple: confidence. Over the next several years, the growth of Spanx became unstoppable. The company expanded its product lines, new styles, new fabrics, new innovations. Retailers across the world began carrying the brand. Celebrities started wearing it. Fashion stylists recommended it, and the company continued to grow year after year. Eventually, something remarkable happened. Sara Blakely became the youngest self-made female billionaire at the time. Think about that for a moment. She didn't inherit wealth. She didn't start with investors. She started with $5,000 and an idea, and she turned it into a billion-dollar company. That's the power of belief combined with relentless action. Now here's the most important lesson from this entire story. The success of Spanx was never just about shapewear. It was about mindset, because the journey of Sara Blakely proves something powerful. You don't need perfect conditions to start. You don't need millions of dollars. You don't need a perfect plan. What you need is a problem worth solving, the courage to take action, and the persistence to keep going when others say it can't be done. Every great company begins the same way, with one person who refuses to accept the limits that the world tries to place on them. And when that happens, ideas become companies, companies become movements, and movements change the world. Let me tell you something powerful about success. The people who change industries are rarely the ones who follow the rules. They are the ones who question the rules. When Sara Blakely started building Spanx, she was entering an industry dominated by massive corporations with decades of experience. Traditional brands were doing things the same way they always had. But Sara brought a completely different perspective. She approached the business as a customer. She asked simple questions. Why isn't shapewear comfortable? Why does it look unattractive? Why can't it be empowering instead of embarrassing? Those questions led to innovation, and innovation led to disruption. Because sometimes the greatest advantage you have is not knowing the old rules. Every success story includes rejection. In fact, rejection is often the very thing that prepares you for success. Before the world celebrated Sara Blakely as a billionaire entrepreneur, she heard the word no countless times. Manufacturers rejected her idea. Retailers doubted the product. People questioned whether it would ever work. But instead of seeing rejection as failure, she treated it as feedback. She improved the product, refined the message, strengthened her vision, and eventually those same doors that once closed began to open. Because persistence has a strange power. If you refuse to quit long enough, the world eventually notices. Here is one of the most important lessons from the journey of Sara Blakely. Long before the company became successful, she believed in it. She imagined the future. She visualized women everywhere wearing the product. She saw the brand in stores before it ever existed. And that belief shaped her actions. Because belief influences behavior. And behavior creates results. Most people wait for evidence before they believe. But entrepreneurs often believe before the evidence appears. And that belief becomes the energy that moves the idea forward. Today, Spanx is known around the world. But the true impact of the company goes far beyond revenue numbers. Sara Blakely used her success to support other entrepreneurs, especially women. She invested in female-led businesses, encouraged innovation, and shared the lessons she learned along the way. Because real success isn't just about building wealth, it's about creating opportunities for others. And when entrepreneurs lift others up, their influence multiplies. So what can we learn from the woman who built a $3 billion brand from zero? The lesson is simple. Great ideas can come from ordinary moments. A small frustration, a simple observation, a problem waiting to be solved. But the difference between people who dream and people who build something extraordinary is action. Sara Blakely took action when others would have ignored the idea. She persisted when others would have quit. She believed when others doubted. And that combination created something remarkable. A global brand, a billion-dollar company, and a story that reminds us of something powerful. You don't need perfect circumstances to create success. You just need courage, persistence, and the willingness to start. Because the next billion-dollar idea could begin with a simple thought in your mind today.